I was loading the dishwasher when I heard the laugh. It was a low, intimate sound, the kind of sound that doesn't belong to a father-in-law and his son's wife. I turned around just in time to see my daughter-in-law, Emily, kissing my husband, Mark. In my kitchen, in my home. For a second, everything stopped. Time, sound, even my own heart. It was like the world had frozen on a single, impossible frame. But the next day, what didn't stop was the process server arriving with 2 envelopes, one for him and one for her divorce papers. Many would call me cold, others brave, but no one saw the sleepless nights, the years of tolerated silence, the averted gazes. No one knows what it's like to be doubly betrayed by the people you nourished, literally and emotionally. This is the story of how I lost 2 people and found myself, of how a betrayal served in the kitchen turned into the bitterest and most liberating dish of my life. This isn't just about revenge, it's about dignity, about closing a door without looking back, about looking in the mirror and finally saying, "You deserve nothing less than everything," because in the end there are kisses that burn and decisions that heal. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. And if my story touches you, a quiet little click on the subscribe button would mean the world. Our home, the one Mark and I had built over 40 years, was always filled with noise. The cheerful chaos of our son David growing up, the echoes of birthday parties and holiday dinners. Even the arguments had a certain rhythm, a familiar cadence of a long-term marriage. But in recent years, a different kind of sound had taken over, a hollow silence. It was a quiet that wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, filled with unsaid words and the growing distance between us. Mark and I had become roommates who shared a mortgage. He was a man who had slowly retreated into himself, or perhaps into a world I was no longer a part of. He'd spend his evenings in his study, the glow of his laptop screen illuminating a face that had become increasingly foreign to me. Our conversations were transactional, about bills and groceries, the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom. The man I had fallen in love with, the one with a booming laugh and a passion for old jazz records, had been replaced by this quiet, detached stranger. I told myself it was just what happens. Marriages evolve, people change. We were comfortable, and I mistook that comfort for contentment. Then came Emily. When David brought her home for the first time, she was like a burst of sunlight, bubbly, charming, and so clearly in love with our son. I was thrilled. I had always wanted a daughter, and Emily seemed to fit perfectly into the space I had kept for one in my heart. She called me Mom, and I embraced it. I taught her my grandmother's lasagna recipe. We went shopping for her wedding dress, and I held her hand when she and David had their first serious fight. I treated her like my own blood. She and Mark hit it off immediately. He was suddenly more animated, more engaged than I'd seen him be in years. "She's a firecracker, isn't she?" he'd say, a rare smile reaching his eyes. I was happy for him, for them. I saw it as Emily breathing life back into our quiet home, bridging the gap that had formed between Mark and me. I saw their easy banter and shared jokes as a sign of a healthy, happy family. I was so wrong. The day it happened was a Sunday, just like any other. David was out of town for a work conference. He'd be back on Tuesday. Emily had come over for dinner, a common occurrence. She said she felt lonely in their big house by herself. I made her favorite meal, roasted chicken with rosemary potatoes. Mark opened a bottle of expensive red wine, one we'd been saving. The 3 of us sat at the dinner table, the conversation flowing easily. We talked about David's trip, about a new show Emily was hooked on, about Mark's upcoming retirement. It felt normal, deceptively normal. After dinner, Emily offered to help with the dishes, as she always did. "You sit, Mom, you cooked," she insisted, her smile as bright as ever. Mark lingered in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, sipping his wine. I was at the sink, rinsing plates, my back to them, listening to their chatter. It was harmless stuff, mostly about office politics at the architecture firm where Mark had been a partner and where Emily now worked as a junior designer. It was a connection they shared, one I wasn't part of, but I never thought anything of it. That's when I heard it. Her laugh. It wasn't her usual bubbly giggle, it was low, throaty, a sound meant for one person's ears only. It made the hairs on my arm stand up. I stopped what I was doing, the water running over my hands, and I turned. The scene is etched into my memory like a photograph developed in acid. The lighting in our kitchen was warm, soft. Mark was still leaning against the counter, but he wasn't looking at her. His eyes were closed. Emily was standing in front of him, her hands on his chest, her face tilted up to his, and she was kissing him. It wasn't a peck on the cheek. It was a real, lingering kiss. The kind a wife gives her husband, for a moment that stretched into an eternity. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My brain simply refused to process what my eyes were seeing. It was a violation on so many levels: my husband, my daughter-in-law, my son's wife. In my kitchen, the heart of our home, a space where I had poured love into countless meals. The plate I was holding slipped from my numb fingers and shattered on the floor. The sound broke the spell. They sprang apart, their faces a mask of horror and guilt. Emily's eyes were wide, her hand flying to her mouth. Mark looked at me, and for the first time in 40 years, I saw pure panic in his eyes, not regret, not shame, just the raw fear of being caught. "Sarah," he started, his voice a hoarse whisper. "It's not what you think." The classic line, the pathetic go-to excuse of every cheater in history. Emily just stood there, frozen, tears welling in her eyes. She looked like a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar, not a grown woman who had just betrayed her husband and her mother-in-law. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I didn't say a word. A strange glacial calm washed over me. I looked at the broken plate on the floor, the shards scattered like the pieces of my life. I looked at the two of them, standing there, their guilt hanging in the air like a foul odor. And then I turned and walked out of the kitchen, up the stairs, and into my bedroom, locking the door behind me. The silence that followed was louder than any shouting match could ever have been. It was the sound of an entire world, an entire life, coming to an end. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the armchair by the window, watching the suburban streetlights cast long shadows across the lawn. The house was silent again, but this time, the silence was different. It wasn't empty, it was thick with betrayal. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator from downstairs, seemed to mock me. I heard Mark pace outside the bedroom door for a while, his footsteps hesitant. He knocked softly once. "Sarah, can we talk?" I didn't answer. Eventually, the footsteps faded away. I imagined him retreating to the guest room, or maybe the sofa, a temporary exile in his own home. My mind was a whirlwind. I replayed the scene in the kitchen over and over, each time feeling the same sickening jolt. But underneath the shock and the pain, something else was taking root, a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. That kiss, that laugh, they spoke of familiarity, of a history I had been blind to. How many times had they shared looks across the dinner table that I had misinterpreted? How many late nights at the office were not about work at all? The signs were all there, hiding in plain sight, and I had been too trusting, too comfortable, to see them. I thought about my son David. My heart ached for him. He was a good man, a loving husband. He adored Emily. He trusted his father implicitly. This news would shatter him. It would destroy his image of his wife and his father, the two people, besides me, who were supposed to be his anchors. The thought of inflicting that pain on him was agonizing, but the thought of letting him live in a lie was worse. He deserved the truth, no matter how ugly. As the first grey light of dawn broke through the window, my decision was made. There would be no tearful confrontations, no dramatic scenes, no begging for explanations I already knew were lies. I had given Mark 40 years of my life. I had given Emily my love and acceptance as a daughter. They had repaid me with the ultimate disrespect. This wasn't something to be fixed. It was something to be ended, swiftly and definitively. At 7 a.m., I unlocked my bedroom door. The house was still quiet. I walked downstairs with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I made coffee, my movements mechanical and precise. I didn't look at the spot where they had stood. I didn't look at the counter where his wine glass still sat. I was a surgeon, preparing to cut out a cancer. Mark came into the kitchen, looking haggard. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes were rumpled. He had clearly slept on the couch. "Sarah, please," he began, his voice pleading. "We need to talk about last night. It was a stupid, foolish mistake." I didn't look at him, I just poured my coffee. "There's nothing to talk about, Mark," I said, my voice even, and devoid of emotion. It was a voice I barely recognized as my own. "Don't say that," he said, taking a step closer. 40 years, Sarah. You can't just throw away 40 years over one stupid moment." I finally turned to face him, my coffee mug held like a shield. "One moment, is that what it was?" I asked. "Or was it just the one moment I happened to see?" He had the decency to look away, unable to meet my gaze. That was all the confirmation I needed. "I need you to leave," I said calmly. "Pack a bag and go to a hotel. Or your brother's. I don't care where, just get out of my house." "Our house," he corrected, a flicker of his old arrogance returning. "Not for long," I replied, and walked out of the kitchen. My next call was to the best divorce attorney in the city. I had seen her name, Helen Reed, on a magazine cover once. The shark with a heart. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in her plush office, a cup of tea I hadn't touched, sitting on the table in front of me. I told her the whole story, my voice never wavering. I laid out the facts, from the kiss in the kitchen to Mark's non-denial that morning. Helen listened patiently, her expression a mixture of professionalism and compassion. "Sarah," she said, when I had finished, "you have every right to be angry, and you have every right to end this marriage. What do you want to do?" "I want it over," I said. "And I want another set of papers drawn up." Helen raised an eyebrow. "For whom?" "My daughter-in-law, Emily. Her full name is Emily Carter Thompson. She lives at 125 Willow Creek Lane. I want her served at the same time as Mark." Helen leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. "You want to serve them both with divorce papers?" "They shared a kiss," I said. "It seems only fair they share the consequences." "This is unconventional," Helen said. "You're not divorcing her, your son is." "My son doesn't know it yet," I replied. "But he will, and when he does, he'll need the paperwork ready. I'll pay for it. Consider it a gift, to help him move on." Helen looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've heard it all. But this is a first. I like your style, Sarah. Let's get to work." By late afternoon, the papers were drawn up, and a process server had been dispatched. I went home to a blessedly empty house. Mark had taken my words to heart, and left. A small suitcase was gone from our closet. I spent the rest of the day in a strange daze, cleaning. I scrubbed the kitchen floor where the plate had shattered, wiping away any last physical remnant of the night before. I packed Mark's things from the master bathroom into a cardboard box. I was reclaiming my space, 1 square foot at a time. The call came at 6:02 p.m. It was David, his voice frantic. "Mom, what the hell is going on? I just got a call from Emily. She's hysterical. Something about a man showing up at the door with divorce papers. And Dad just called me from a hotel, saying you kicked him out." I took a deep breath. This was it. The hardest part. "David, honey, you need to come home," I said. My voice gentle but firm. "I think you should cut your trip short. There's something we need to talk about in person." "Mom, talk to me now. Emily is sobbing, saying you're divorcing Dad and that you sent her papers too. It makes no sense. Did you have a fight?" "It was more than a fight, David," I said, the ache in my chest for him almost unbearable. "Please, just come home. I'll explain everything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, filled with his confusion and dawning fear. "Okay," he finally said, his voice small. "My flight lands at 10 tomorrow morning." Hanging up the phone, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. The first shots had been fired. The war had begun. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that there would be no winners, only survivors. Now I'm curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And if you're finding value in my story, please take a moment to leave a like. It helps more than you know. The next morning, the air in the house was heavy with anticipation. I waited for David's arrival like a soldier waiting for a battle. I had armed myself with the truth, but I knew it was a weapon that would wound him as much as anyone else. When he walked through the door, his face was a canvas of anxiety. He dropped his bag and hugged me tightly. "Mom, what is happening? Please, just tell me." I led him to the living room, the one we barely used, the one reserved for serious conversations. We sat on the pristine sofa, and I took his hands in mine. I looked into the eyes of the boy I had raised, now a man on the precipice of having his world torn apart, and I told him. I recounted the story in a low, steady voice, sticking to the facts. The laugh, the kiss, their reaction. I didn't embellish, I didn't editorialize. I just laid the ugly truth out between us. As I spoke, his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to a dark, simmering anger. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, staring at the floor. He had pulled his hands from mine. "No," he said finally, shaking his head. "No, there has to be a mistake. A misunderstanding. Emily, she wouldn't. Dad, he wouldn't." "I saw it with my own eyes, David," I said softly. "Maybe you misinterpreted it. Maybe it was a friendly thing, a weird, awkward, I don't know," he said, his voice rising with desperation. He was trying to build a reality where this wasn't true, brick by flimsy brick. "David," I said, my voice firm, "it was not a friendly thing. Your father didn't deny it. He just called it a stupid moment." He stood up and started pacing, running his hands through his hair. "I need to talk to her. I need to hear her side of it." "Of course you do," I said. "But David, be prepared. They will lie. They will try to manipulate you, to turn you against me. They'll say I'm old, that I'm crazy, that I'm trying to ruin your happiness." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "She wouldn't do that to me." My heart broke for his naivete. "I hope you're right," I lied. He left a few minutes later, his car peeling out of the driveway. I knew where he was going. He was going to walk into the lion's den, and I could only pray he would come out unscathed. The next few days were a blur of angry phone calls and emotional warfare. Mark was the first to launch his offensive. He alternated between begging and threatening. One minute, he was leaving me tearful voicemails about our 40 years together, about the memories, about how we could get through this with therapy. The next, he was sending cold, formal emails through his lawyer, talking about division of assets and claiming I was acting erratically and emotionally. He was trying to paint me as the hysterical woman, the cliché I had always despised. Emily's strategy was different, more insidious. She played the victim. She called David constantly, weeping, telling him how much she loved him, how I had always been cold to her, how I must have twisted what I saw. She sent me long, rambling texts filled with apologies, but they were apologies for the misunderstanding, for how it must have looked, not for what she had actually done. She was trying to gaslight me, to make me question my own sanity. The worst part was that, for a while, it almost worked. On David, he was caught in the crossfire, a prisoner of war between his parents and his wife. He came back to my house 2 days later, looking exhausted and torn. "I spoke to Emily," he said, slumping onto a kitchen chair. "She says it was a moment of weakness. She's been under a lot of stress at work. Dad's been mentoring her, and she says she just got her signals crossed. She swears it meant nothing and that she loves me." "And you believe her?" I asked, my voice tight. "I don't know what to believe," he exploded. "All I know is that my wife is a wreck, my dad is living in a hotel, and my mum is blowing up our entire family over something she saw for 2 seconds." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Blowing up our family," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "They set the bomb, David. I just refused to let it tick in silence in the middle of my home. Maybe you could have talked to them." To me, why go straight to divorce lawyers? Mom, why be so destructive? That's when my own anger, the one I had kept so carefully contained, finally broke free. Destructive? I have spent 40 years building this family. I have cooked, cleaned, and cared. I welcomed that woman into my home and into my heart, like a daughter. I supported your father through every career move, every crisis, every single day. I have been a good wife and a good mother. And in return, they humiliated me in the most profound way possible. Forgiveness is a two-way street, David. It requires remorse, and I have seen none. I have only seen damage control. So don't you dare stand in my kitchen and accuse me of being the one who is destroying this family. This family was destroyed the moment your wife put her lips on your father. We stared at each other, the raw, painful truth hanging in the air between us. The anger drained out of him, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. He finally saw it. He saw that I wasn't acting out of spite, but out of a profound, unbreachable sense of self-respect. "I have the divorce papers I had drawn up for you," I said, my voice softer now. "They're in the study. You don't have to use them. The choice is yours. But you deserve to know that you have a way out of this lie if you want it." He didn't say anything, he just nodded, and a single tear traced a path down his cheek. That conversation was the turning point. David stopped trying to fix the unfixable and started listening. He saw Emily's tearful apologies for what they were, attempts to escape consequences. He saw our father's pleas as a desperate bid to hold on to his comfortable life. The fog of denial began to lift. My lawyer, Helen, was my rock. She was the shark with a heart, as advertised. She was ruthless in negotiations but compassionate in our private meetings. "They'll try to wear you down, Sarah," she warned me. "That's the strategy. They'll drag it out, hoping you'll get tired and give in." "Don't." I didn't. I found a strength I never knew I possessed. I had spent so much of my life being a wife and a mother that I had forgotten how to just be Sarah. Now, I was rediscovering her. I started taking long walks, going to the art museum downtown, reconnecting with old friends I had drifted away from. I was building a new life for myself, even as the old one was being dismantled. The legal battle was ugly. Mark fought me on everything, from the division of our retirement accounts to who got the damn silverware. It was petty and exhausting. But with every pathetic attempt he made to punish me, my resolve hardened. He wasn't the man I had married. Maybe he never was. David eventually made his choice. About a month after that day in the kitchen, he came to me, his eyes clear for the first time in weeks. He was holding the envelope I had given him. "I'm filing," he said simply. She admitted it wasn't the first time. It's been going on for almost a year. I just hugged him. There was nothing else to say. The storm had finally passed over our house, leaving devastation in its wake. But the foundation, the love between a mother and her son, was still standing. And for now, that was enough of a shelter. The divorces were finalized on the same day, 6 months after the kiss. 2 separate court proceedings, 2 endings to stories that had become twisted together. I didn't go to the courthouse. Helen called me with the news. "It's done, Sarah. You're a free woman, a free woman." The words sounded strange, foreign. For 40 years my identity had been Mark's wife, or David's mother. The name Sarah by itself felt both liberating and terrifying. Mark had to sell the house, as per our settlement. I had enough money to buy a smaller place for myself, a charming little condo in a part of the city I'd always loved, with old trees and little independent bookshops. The day I moved out of our family home was bittersweet. I walked through the empty rooms, the echoes of a lifetime bouncing off the bare walls. I remembered bringing David home from the hospital, his first steps in the hallway, the Christmas mornings by the fireplace. There was sadness, yes, but it wasn't the heart-wrenching grief I had anticipated. It was a gentle melancholy, the feeling you get when you finish the last page of a very long book. You're sad it's over, but you're ready for a new story. I never spoke to Mark again after the legal proceedings began. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he and Emily had tried to make a go of it. They rented an apartment together across town. It lasted all of 3 months. The foundation of their relationship was deceit and betrayal, and it crumbled under the weight of reality. There was no family dinner table to legitimize them, no innocent son to buffer their guilt. They were just two broken people who had destroyed everything good in their lives for a sordid thrill. Last I heard, Mark was living alone in a sterile downtown apartment, and Emily had moved back to her hometown to live with her parents, her promising career in architecture in shambles. They got what they deserved, I suppose, an empty life, filled with the ghosts of what they had thrown away. My relationship with David healed, slowly and carefully. The wound was deep, and it left a scar. He had to mourn the loss of his marriage, and the pedestal he had placed his father on. We had to find a new dynamic, one that wasn't based on the old family structure. We started having lunch every Sunday, just the two of us. We talked about everything and nothing. He started therapy, and I was proud of him for it. He was rebuilding himself, just as I was. We were two survivors, finding our way back to shore together. One afternoon, about a year after the divorce, I was watering the flowers on my new balcony. The sun was warm on my face, and the city hummed with life below me. My phone rang. It was David. "Hey Mom," he said, his voice lighter than I'd heard it in a long time. "What are you up to?" "Just enjoying the peace and quiet," I said, smiling. "Well, I was wondering if you'd be up for some company. I met someone, her name is Clara, and I'd really love for you to meet her." My heart swelled. I'd love that, sweetheart. That evening, sitting across from David and his new girlfriend Clara, a kind, intelligent woman, with a warm smile and gentle eyes, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Watching my son laugh, truly laugh, for the first time in what felt like forever, I knew everything was going to be okay. We had survived the storm. Life is quiet now, but it's a different kind of quiet. It's not the heavy, oppressive silence of an unhappy home. It's a peaceful silence, one that I have chosen. It's the quiet of a Sunday morning, with a good book and a cup of coffee. It's the quiet of my own thoughts, no longer crowded with anxiety and resentment. I lost a husband and a daughter-in-law. I lost the home I had lived in for most of my adult life. But in losing all of that, I found something I hadn't even realized was missing: myself. I found my strength, my independence, my voice. I learned that I am more than a wife or a mother. I am Sarah, and my story is my own. That kiss in the kitchen burned down my old life, but from the ashes I built a new one. A smaller, quieter life, yes, but a life that is authentically, unapologetically, and finally, mine, and it is more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.